Hello, I'm your host, Terry Saunders. On this episode of Treasure Expeditions, I visit the mountains of Estes Park, Colorado. I visit the Stanley Hotel, and I photograph elk and other wildlife. Inventor Freeland Oscar Stanley arrived in Estes Park in 1903. According to the Stanley Hotel website, F.O. Stanley was suffering from tuberculosis, but his season in the area helped his condition. Freeland Oscar Stanley and his wife Flora set out to build a beautiful, elegant hotel like those back east. The Stanley Hotel opened in 1909 in Estes Park. Freeland Oscar Stanley designed a steam car. A tour guide tells us more.
Now, it had a boiler system underneath here, where if you started running out of steam coming up the mountain, that was no sweat. The driver grabbed a bucket from the back, fill it up. You got the St. Vrain on one side, the Big Thompson on the other, fill it up with water. You would never run out of steam coming up the mountain. 23, 24 horsepower, about the equivalent to a lawnmower. The steam power works very different. Folks, even when combustion engines started to become popular, the Model T started rolling out there, they couldn't get up the mountain in elevation. They would just start bogging down, come down in reverse. It took them a while to figure out all that compression, etc. But these steam cars, they would jet right up there. 55 miles an hour is about the top speed, not really known for their brakes, right? It would take the length of a football field to stop one of these guys on a level surface. Can you imagine coming downhill? Yeah, you might want to think twice about that. Well, 55 wasn't good enough for the Stanley twins. I told you how just ingenious these boys were. They decided to enter the land speed trials in 1906. The Stanleys would retrofit this exact same technology, frame, suspension, whatnot. They looked like an upside down canoe on top of it with a cockpit. They called it the Stanley Rocket. Folks, that year they entered the land speed trials out in Arizona. They set a world record that would last for over 100 years. They took that Stanley Rocket at 127 miles an hour. Now the Stanleys never ever being one to be happy, fulfilled with anything they accomplished in life. They always wanted to one-up themselves. They went back the next year to break that record. Folks, they did. They took the Stanley Rocket 157 miles.
Stanley's steam car to a portrait of F.O. Stanley by well-known artist Kathy Goodell.
About 10 years ago, myself, Kathy Goodell, and Jim Biggers, my companion, we were commissioned to paint all of the owners that have owned the Stanley Hotel. And in the middle of all that, we got about 5 or 6 of them done, and the manager there was a new manager that came in, and that whole idea kind of fell apart. But anyway, I was able to paint F.O. Stanley, and all these other people at one time owned the Stanley Hotel. And Flora, who is on the opposite wall, was F.O.'s wife, and Jim Biggers painted her.
Another painting by artist Kathy Goodell is hanging in the Stanley.
It's oil paint, and we used photographs that the Stanley had and owned. So it was done from a photograph, and I did several studies. I still have one study at my house that the Stanley doesn't own. They own these now because we were paid for, they were commissioned by the Stanley to paint them.
From Kathy Goodell's paintings to Estes Park sightseers, I spoke to Noreen and Kevin.
We went through the Rocky Mountain National Park. We went hiking there.
Noreen talks about the importance of nature.
I've always loved nature and animals, so I would probably use it to allow my students to express what they like and use observation to learn more.
Noreen talks about the scenery in Estes Park.
It's a lot more landscape to take in than
pretty.
Ohio.
It's so pretty.
Noreen comments on Colorado's scenery.
Colorado's beautiful. Really is.
Next, Noreen talks about the river walk to Estes Lake.
And we went through the trails.
Claims of haunted happenings at the Stanley Hotel. Noreen explains her thoughts on the matter.
So I believe in ghosts. So if somebody tells me it's haunted, who am I to say it's not? I don't know. And I'm not really scared of it either. I mean, ghosts can be fun.
I don't believe in ghosts.
A writer put the Stanley on the map.
September 30th, 1974. That's when Stephen King would make us famous, folks. Now, 74, I told you, that's when that gentleman, Frank Normale, purchased our hotel out of bankruptcy. We were not this grand mecca on top of the hill, just screaming at you as soon as you cross the river or the lake back then. No, we had roofs missing. We had yellow stickers, red stickers. We had buildings that were boarded up. You guys get the idea, right? Well, that's exactly the condition that the hotel was in when King would pay us a visit. Purely by circumstance, folks. Stephen King had no intention of ever coming here. Now, the Kings had moved from Boulder from Maine in 74. King, his wife Tabitha, and their 3-year-old boy. King took a job teaching at the university, folks. He had written one book by this point, Carrie. The man was not this famous, brilliant author that we know of him today. In fact, Carrie, the critics didn't care much for it, fans either. The man, well, he was going through a rough patch in his life. The worst case of writer's block he's ever had. You couple that with a crippling bout of alcoholism, the man himself will tell you it was a rough time. Well, that would snowball, folks, marital problems with his son. You get the idea, right? Well, Tabitha, recognizing this pattern of behavior, she says, hey, how about you and I? We go get a cabin out here in Grand Lake. I hear it's beautiful. We'll get away for the weekend. Give you some inspiration. Just a getaway. King agrees. September 30th, they take off driving on a beautiful day from Boulder. Folks, you may or may not know where Grand Lake is. It's on the other side of the park, right? Well, the Kings, they were unaware of this. They knew they could get through it. On the map, it says Trail Ridge Road. Trail Ridge Road, let me see if I can spit this out. First tour of the day. The highest single paved continuity, nope, I couldn't get through it. It's about 11,000 feet, and it's the longest road of that nature elevation. Well, you can imagine there's 3 or 4 months a year that it's open, and the rest of the time, folks, it's shut down. Folks, sometimes you get 40 or 50 feet of snowpack. When it's a beautiful day down here, 11,000 plus feet, it could be different. That's exactly what happened to the Kings. They drove through a couple hours into the park, forced them to shut down, turned around. They stayed here simply because Tabitha was exhausted. She wanted to rest at the first hotel they saw. Happened to be us. Now, we had the lights on, but the majority of the doors and windows were already boarded. Why? September 30th. That was our last day of operation. Remember, we were seasonal all the way till 1983 when they gave us heat. We had already packaged up all the goods. We'd sent off the majority of food. All the employees, we'd done all the books and all the taxes. The Kings pull up, bang on the front door. We greeted and initially turned away Stephen King. It's like, no man, you're a day late and $1 short, my friend. We're shut down. Well, King did not take no for an answer, would continue to bang on the door. Folks, I really have no idea what allowed Stephen King to stay here at this hotel, right? Well, I got some idea. Here's what we do know. We know he had to pay cash. Again, all of our books were down. We're not about to swipe that card, make those adjustments for one couple. We told the Kings he would be the only guest. Didn't bother that horror writer. Now, we gave him a small tour of the property. Fed him a meal in our McGregor dining room. Let me set that scene up for you very quickly. There's a big, beautiful ballroom, right? It's got all these tables, tablecloths on there with the chairs up, folks. We're shutting down for the next 8 months, except for their one singular table, their one light on, served the likes of sandwiches by our cook. It's what we had left. King was quoted saying years later it was the creepiest meal he's ever had his entire life, right? We'll take that. After the meal, Tabitha, all she wanted to do was rest. She would come right up here to 217, and that's the end of her story. King, being the man he is, well, he's still wound up from all the driving. The meal, the ambiance of this old creepy hotel. He rolls right across the parking lot. He sees our bartender in that Tiger Oak bar, slides that 20 across. Grady would slide it right back. Your money's no good here, sir. Again, not that we didn't want to serve Stephen King. Grady had done his books. His tallies are all counted. We don't want to make those adjustments for one guy. But like any good bartender, Grady has his own personal stash, pulls it up here, puts it on the bar, says, I hear you're a writer. King says, yes. He goes, I'm a bartender at this old hotel. Let me tell you what, Mr. King, I've had some strange experiences here. I've been here for a minute. How about you and I? I bet we could swap story for story, drink for drink. What do you say, Mr. King? King agrees. You can see or imagine those two men in that room, drink for drink, story for story. Much like the scene in the movie, right, with Jack and the bartender, except for our bartender, he's really there. Well, King would talk about his influences for Carrie. Some of the short stories he wrote back in college, right? Grady would tell Stephen King about his experiences here. He said, Mr. King, it's my job as the head bartender to lock up all these private ballrooms. Folks, I did the same thing in 2018 when I gave night tours here. Rolled around, locked up all these rooms. Loads of fun, right? Well, he says, I walk across the McGregor room, open up those doors, I shut off all those Tiffany's one by one. I close those doors. He says, occasionally, Mr. King, I only get halfway across the lobby when I hear dancing, music, laughter, lights coming back on. Thinking somebody broke into the place, I run across, I swing open those doors. What do I find? Nobody in there. Dark, empty room. He goes, it's like the party that never ends. Ah, maybe we're starting to see how these ideas would formulate in the mind of a very, very brilliant, perhaps slightly intoxicated writer, right? Well, he would come on up here, he would retire at 217. Now, King would awaken in the middle of the night, hearing his 3-year-old boy screaming bloody murder. A man rushes out of bed, swings open that door. King is trying to call for his son. He's trying to reach for the child, but he's frozen. He cannot move, nor can he speak. That hose had come to life off of that spigot right above this gentleman, started chasing his son like a snake up and down the hallway, terrorizing the poor child. Right here had him wrapped up like a boa constrictor. The nozzle, it rears back, opens right up, big brass teeth, and right as it goes to strike and devour his son whole, King snaps from his lucid nightmare inside of 217. He sits at the edge of the bed, drenched in sweat. He's like, where's my kid? Oh, he's back in Boulder with the nanny. What, that was a nightmare? King goes out onto the balcony. I pointed out to you guys. He fires himself up a smoke. Before he even finishes that smoke, King already has a beginning, middle, end, and character development for The Shining. Folks, it does not take much to spark creativity in that man's genius. All it took was one empty, old, creepy hotel, a few stories from our bartender, and one night in our most infamous room. Now I'm going to answer a question I get asked all the time. Not by you guys yet. Why was he given 217? Because that's our most haunted room? Hardly. Folks, if you're into that sort of thing like me, you want an experience, go stay up on the 4th floor. Pick a room. They are all far more active than 217. Activity? Absolutely. We get people run out of there from time to time. But it was the only room with clean sheets, fresh towels, and linens ready to go. The presidential suite. It wouldn't make any sense to doll up all these rooms, 60 rooms, before you shut down for 8 months. But we've had the Emperor and Empress of Japan, President Roosevelt, President Wilson. We've had Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Johnny Cash, Jim Carrey stayed in there for about 3 hours. That room was always ready to go, folks. That's why he got 217, and King would make that room famous.
I visited the Stanley Hotel and its maze in Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel and stories of its haunted happenings inspired famous horror writer Stephen King to write The Shining. I saw scenery, I photographed deer and elk. Remember, the greatest treasures are the memories along the way. Be sure to check out well-known artist Kathy Goodell's artwork at kathygoodell.com. Also be sure to check out the work of James Biggers.